Hi guys and welcome to Starcity Tutorials. My name is Jay Picasso and today we're going to discuss how to create music or production around vocals. Or in other words, when a singer comes to you and they say, hey, I've got this song, where do you start and how do you start to kind of create production around that? So what I've got in front of me here is I've got a vocal, which is actually from a song that I did with a duo called Eclipse. It's actually out now on SoundCloud. You can find it at soundcloud.com/Eclipse UK. But we're really going to just kind of take a look into the vocals today and try to create something slightly different. Now, there's a few things to kind of take into consideration when working with a song, and I'll try and refer to how singers approach this as well at the same time so it kind of helps you guys. The first thing that you kind of want to establish is the tempo. Because that's fundamentally important to not only the genre of music, but the style in which you can kind of produce around. You really want to give yourself a good idea of the tempo first and foremost. Now, in front of me, I'm fully aware that the tempo is 1/4/4. I remember recording the song, so I've already got the tempo in there, but that's the first thing that I want to adjust in terms of my production on this case, simply because it's going to completely tell me before I even start the song what my sort of parameters are. So if I just listen to the click very quickly, already that's telling me that it's not going to be a slow song, and it's telling me that it's not necessarily going to be something that's sort of low in energy either, simply because it seems quite fast. 1/4/4 is quite fast. We could do half time on this, so that's not to say it couldn't be around sort of 92 BPM, but at the same time, immediately my first thoughts are this is actually originally quite a fast song. Now the second thing that we want to look at, and let's just, before we jump into the second thing, let me just play the vocals to you so you understand what we've got here. So that's an intro section.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again.
That's the verse section, and we'll just jump forward to the chorus quickly.
Is giving up just as long dreams. I way better, blinded by what I see. Give it away. If the ground is sinking, let it fall. Give it away.
So another thing, immediately, just because of the way Jamie's actually singing, I can already tell you, and most of you already tell, that this is obviously quite an energetic song anyway, and that will bear an influence on what we go ahead and do in terms of production. But let's now just take a look into the key fundamentals of where we can kind of start, because obviously if a singer approaches you, the first thing that you want to do, as I said, is get the time, but the second thing you want to do is kind of just have a conversation with them about where they saw the song going. If you can get a reference, that's the best possible thing, because it will tell you immediately what you can kind of do and what you can't do, and it will kind of set rules for your head before you even start. So it's really good to have a reference whenever a singer comes in with a song, particularly where they're not really sure. Even if they don't know what kind of song it should be and they don't have that reference in mind, just ask them for what kind of stuff they're into, give yourself a feel for it, and then you can kind of go from there. Now what I've done is I've now selected some instruments just to start off with. Okay, now I'm only going to use these instruments for today's purposes, but of course, I'm going to be using MIDI, which means that they can always change. We can always change this piano, for example, into a synth later down the line. We could always change these strings, for example, into an arpeggiator down the line. This Buzz Moog is actually a bass, and this is my drums down here. So bearing in mind, when we kind of get something popping off, we do focus a lot more on the production around these things, and we layer and stuff like that. But for today's purposes and just kind of getting the vibe going, which is oftentimes the most important thing, we're just going to kind of roll with it. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to give the song a listen, and if your singer's there, just ask them to sing the song through. I mean, some singers can be uncomfortable with this, but they should be at a stage now where they're comfortable enough with you to at least sing you the song, or at least voice note it on an iPhone, or just send you over a recording so you have something to work with. And now I'm just going to give this a listen, and I'm going to show you how I would find something suitable around this song. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to play the song, and I'm going to look for what's known as the root note. Now, the root note is a really complex thing as far as music theory is concerned, but in actual practical using it in production, it's very straightforward. And what that really means is I'm going to find the note on the keyboard which seems to be the most consistent throughout the song. Okay, and I'll go through that as clearly as I can. So I'm going to press play now, and I'm just going to sit on the keyboard and find the key which I feel most represents the song and is consistently heard most throughout the music. In other words, it should be the key that does not clash. Okay, it should, in theory, and this isn't always the case, but 90% of the time, particularly in pop music, it shouldn't clash with anything that goes on in this song. You know, if we have a bridge section or something like that, potentially, but as it stands, it shouldn't. So let's just give that a go. I'm going to use the piano to start off with, and I'm just going to start at the beginning of the song and try and find this note. Okay, so let's listen as we go. Or do you know?
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long.
Okay, so I actually found it pretty quickly. It was a complete accident as it goes, but I did find it pretty quickly. Now, in this case, I can actually see that I've done this already, hence why I probably found it so quickly. But in this case, my root note is actually a C. Now, I've noticed over here on the left that I've actually transposed it down 2 semitones. So actually, initially, it was more than likely D, and it's gone down 1 semitone to C sharp and down another semitone to C. So in theory, this should actually be relatively easy for me to play because it's in a C scale. That's what we know at the moment. Whether it's minor or major now is what we determine. Okay, and the simplicity of determining minor and major really is major tends to sound happy in terms of your chord progressions. Minor tends to sound moody or sad in terms of your chord progression. So if I now I know that my root note is a C note, let's just see what happens if I play a C major note and then versus a C minor note over the top of this in terms of a chord. Okay, so let's just check this out again. So the first is C major.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again.
Okay, immediately to me something seemed wrong, seemed too happy. So now let's try C minor, okay?
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again.
Much better. Okay, so immediately in my mind that seemed to fit a lot better. So now our process is quite straightforward. Okay, so if you're not like a musical phenomenon or something like that, this process can still be quite simple. Okay, and really what you're going to do, it really is helpful for you to know at least a few basic chords on your keyboard. You know, you want to be hitting, in terms of scales, you should be hitting number 1, number 3 and number 5 at least. You know, you can deal with inversions and adding, you know, sevenths and diminished and stuff like that afterwards, but I would suggest that you at least figure out the 1, 3 and 5 in a chord. And I guess in most instances I might as well tell you that in minor chords you simply flatten the third note, sorry, the 3 in it, so the second note in the chord, but out of the 1, 3 and 5 you're going to flatten the 3. Okay, and that turns your major happy sounding chord into a minor sad sounding chord. So now I've figured out that my key in this case is in C minor. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm just going to put together, and I'm just going to feel this out, 3 chords. Okay, 3 chords in this instance should do it. All right, there's probably a few chord changes and progressions throughout this song, and you will need that from your singer. Go forward listening, of course, but be prepared that, you know, most songs can be made out of 3 or 4 chords. Most songs that we hear on radio, particularly in the top 40, generally are made out of 3 or 4 chords. So you don't have to search that far for this great song. You just have to know where to start and where to go and the direction you're headed. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm just going to try and figure out these chords. And as soon as I get them, I'm just going to record those chords in and set a loop so we can kind of build on that. Okay, so let's give it a go.
Took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternative? Will I know better than to let you hurt again? Is giving up just the usual ending to my destiny? Is long enough just the same old message clocking constantly?
Okay, so I've just tried 2 there, and to be honest with you, The second one seems like something that I'd be more than likely to do, but let's just stick with the first one. It seemed a bit slower and therefore slightly easier to start off with. Okay, so don't complicate things. Sometimes just hold a chord and see how it sounds, and then move on to the next. Don't feel that every single phrase that the singer does, you have to change chords. That's not the case. Just find yourself something nice, keep it solid, and then build on it. All right, but what we're trying to do is just kind of get this going as quickly as possible. So let's just build on that first set I did. I'm just going to record it in now, see how we go.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternate end? Will I know better than to let you hurt again? Is giving.
Okay, cool. So actually there was one note that I didn't like in there, and I think that was around bar 17, but we'll change that when we get there. So let's just listen to that and see how that came out. Now I'm going to quantize this as I go, and that's why I've had the clicker on, just so I can keep in time. So I'm just going to double click, highlight all of these down here by clicking Command and A, which is a very quick way of highlighting all. And then I'm just going to keep to 1/16th note, and I'm just going to click quantize, which puts these all now in time. So let's just listen to that through.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternate end? Will I know better than to let you hurt again?
So I just want to replace that chord probably with the first set that we did there, just to see if that sounds any better, okay?
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternate end? Will I know better than to let you hurt again?
Okay, cool. So it's not perfect, but it works. Now I've noticed, and you'll notice this from your singer, that the next section is actually exactly the same. So we're not going to go much further than this, to be honest with you, because you'll start to find that sections start to sound the same as we go anyway. Obviously after this I know that my chorus is there, but I'm going to assume that there's going to be some similar notes in there for the time being. And then of course by the time we get to verse 2, generally speaking, we're going to be using the same sort of structure. So for now, let's just hone in on this first part of the verse. Okay, we're just going to hone in on this first part of the verse. So now I've got some piano down, it seems that I want to start adding things around that. Okay, so let's move straight to my bass. All right, now this is when we discuss the root note. So the root note is really important in this case, because oftentimes that's where the bass starts. Obviously a bit lower. Okay, so just using that and already having put the chords down, and if I just double click on this just to show you guys, here we can see that I've only used I really haven't changed that much in terms of these chords, and in fact it's really the root note that has changed around the top chord. So that's something where the bass can kind of come in now and make a really nice difference. So let's add bass and see what happens, okay?
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternate end? Will I know better than to let you hurt again? All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again.
All right, cool. So I'm trying to get a little bit fancy on it, but let's add that anyway. Let's just add some basic bass, and if I can put any cool bits in on the fly as we go, then I'll do so. But let's just concentrate mainly on just sort of the root notes for the time being, okay?
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternate end?
Okay, cool. So I did get a little fancy there, and well, I say little, I tried and made a little mistake. So let's just delete that and extend that. So now we should have the right notes in all the place. So again, I'm just going to highlight all of those and quantize.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternative? Will I know?
Just noticed that we changed that note the first time round. Personally, I did actually think it sounded better down there, but let's just stick with what's here for the time being. Again, these are decisions that you can make down the line, but just for my own ears right here, right now, I'm just going to make that adjustment, yo. So yes, that's generally what we do, okay, with the bass. Now, ignore these notes up here because really and truly, I'd probably come back and, you know, try and make something more out of these or less out of these, or, you know, put them on another channel or something like that. So now, moving on, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a quick look at the strings before we add drums. Now, I'd probably add drums before this point in time, but since we need something to kind of add, I don't know, let's call it icing to a cake, we're going to add the drums last. Okay, we'll call them the icing for today. All right, so strings. Okay, so we're going to apply a really, really simple principle with the strings. The same principle I would apply to any kind of lead instrument, you know. Start with the root, explore from there, and then just add something different, you know, whether it be a pattern or whether it be, you know, a note that's slightly outside of the scale that we've got in front of us now in terms of the piano and the bass, or, you know, because we're not going to use this in the chord sense, all right? So we're not going to play chords on this. We're just going to try and add like some kind of lead that will support the vocal line, okay? So in this case, I'm going to try something very, very simple, but we're just going to keep it going and see how we roll from there, all right? So let's just give it a go.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternative? Will I know better than to let you hurt again? All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge.
Okay, very, very basic again. All I'm really doing in this case is going from the root note up a third and then a fifth. That's not quite a seventh, it's more like a sixth. So again, I've just added something extra. All right, so I'm going to record this in. What I'll do is I'll take out the bass so we can just hear it a little bit better. And in fact, yes, no, we'll just take out the bass and I'll turn the metronome back on. Okay, so let's give it a go.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternative? Will I know better than to let you hurt again? All my friends.
Okay, so actually even more simple than I thought. You can actually see what I've done down here. Okay, so I've literally gone between three notes on the top and the bottom note has stayed the same all the way through. Again, very, very simple. These are my first thoughts. And so I probably, again, might change this later down the line or, you know, change the instrument down the line. But again, you've got to get a vibe before you can start saying the vibe isn't working. You know, you've got to just start with something and you kind of got to get the singer excited in initially, you know. I think this phase is probably the most important because when you're working with a singer, what you really want to do is you want to jump in with energy and you want to kind of immediately make them feel that you're taking it somewhere. You know, it doesn't have to be in the perfect direction right now. You can hone in on that later, but you just want to feel like it's moving. Otherwise, it almost drags and drips through. So, you know, come with something, and then from there, you can start to take your time. You know, the singer doesn't have to be with you all day, every day, you know, and if you've got your laptop or you've got a studio of your own, then, you know, you can always work on this in your own time and show them more ideas, but just give them a vibe. All right, just give them a vibe. So now let's just bring back in the bass, hear how that sounds together.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson, find alternative?
Okay, cool. So that seems to be all right. Mix is completely all over the place, but you know, we're building a vibe. So now let's just add the cream to the cake, all right, or the icing on the cake. All right, now 1/4/4 tempo wise, this is like major when it comes to drums, because drums really determines to a lot of degree the style these days. You know, not only the types of sounds that you use, but often just the, you know, the drum itself. And I'll give you a few examples of that, just like right here and now. Okay. So I'm just going to use a kick and a snare drum to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. Okay, kick and a snare clappy thing. All right, so this 1/4/4 probably far too fast, but if we were going for like a real kind of housey vibe, let me take the piano and strings off, and this is probably what we'd do.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again.
Yeah, like really to the beat, foot to the floor, you know, on every kind of count, and you know, just really hard. You'd add some hi-hats, you know, some open hi-hats on every offbeat, and all of a sudden you got yourself like a really, really housey kind of beat. Right, now if you want to do like let's say like a garage slash you know, dubstep slash drum and bass, that kind of vibe, again, same two things. I'll try and illustrate this best as I can.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Tossing time.
Yeah, that kind of vibe. Again, the sounds really, really kind of help contribute to, you know, the patterns that I'm playing. And obviously you would have to adjust the tempo again somewhat. But again, this is kind of the idea that I'm giving you, that the drums really do determine. So again, hip hop would probably be something towards the end of what I was doing there and sound something like this.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long.
Okay, and today that works. That works for me. So let's add that in. Let's just add that in.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again?
Okay, that's cool for now. So again, let's just double click on that, highlight all, quantize, bring that over here.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta
Now, it just wouldn't be complete if I didn't duplicate this channel and just add some hi-hats in. Okay, so I'm just going to add that real quick.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the.
That will do, that'll do, pig, that'll do. Highlight again, quantize, just cut the edges off so it's nice and neat. Copy and paste. I think we got to 9. Yes, we did. Copy and paste. Don't forget about the ends. You know, try and cut those off, but I'll just move those all back at the same time. Nice and neat. Hear how that sounds, shall we?
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge so long, will I find myself again? Tossing time, will I learn my lesson, find alternative? Will I know better than to let you hurt again?
Cool. So there you have it, really. One section of the song. Now, I'm going to go ahead and, again, assume that the second part of the verse sounds exactly the same. So let's just see how that sounds. Again, you may need adjusting. Your singer's song may not be in this structure, so don't just assume that. But I know this song, so I'm going to just see how that sounds across this section, and then we're done.
All my friends took heat for too long, gotta find myself again.
In fact, nah, let's have a bit more fun in that, shall we? Let's just whack a quick arrangement on it so we can hear something interesting. So let's get rid of the drums here. We'll have these hi-hats come and count us in roughly around this time here. Bass won't drop until then. And then, you know what? Let's split that in two, shall we? No, let's keep that. Let's keep that as it is. Let's keep that as it is, and I might take some of the piano out when the drum drops, just to kind of clear a bit of space, you know. So if I show you what I mean, you know, if this were a bit longer, then I might just do that, you know. We kind of arrange as we go, but let's hear how that sounds.
keep for too long. Gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge, so gone. Will I find myself again? Toss and turn, will I learn my lesson? Find alternative. Will I know better than to let you hurt again? Is giving up just the usual ending to my destiny? Is long enough just the same old message clocking constantly? I'm waking up to the morning shadows clouding up my dreams. Will I know better than to let it hinder me? Will
Cool. So there you have it. All right. So just a quick recap on how we kind of got where we are now. First things first, set a tempo for yourself. Okay, the tempo is really, really important. Second of all, select an instrument. Just, keys is always a good place to start. This doesn't have to be keys. If I were to write right now, change this to something else, let's just literally, as we can, just change it to something else, and you'll see that it gives it a completely different feel. But keys is often a very good place to start, simply because it's one of the basic instruments. We learn it in school or whatever, so it's a really, really good place to start. But if I was to select, just for example, like pads here, I wouldn't recommend starting with pads unless you've got a really, really great one immediately, because they can be quite, some of the notes can sustain a bit longer than you need, and automatically create a feel for a song that you weren't really going for in the first place. So consider piano like a guitar. It's just something to write a song with, essentially. But let's hear how this sounds, just for the sake of it.
all my friends took heat for too long. Gotta find myself again. Stood alone on the edge, so gone. Will I find myself again?
That's not bad. I'd probably have to spend a bit more time looking for a pad, really, if I wanted one. But the point that I'm trying to make is that you can change those parts. All right, these instruments are all MIDI. I can change any of these at any point in time, so they're not fixed. It's just to catch a vibe. Okay, so selecting your instruments can be quite important at this stage, but at the same time, nothing's set in stone. But know your singer. Find something that they like. This is why the references are so cool, because if you hear references where they've only given you like some Euro house, you kind of know not to put necessarily strings in it or something like that. Not to say they don't exist in Euro house, of course they do, but what the point that I'm making is that they aren't dominant instruments. They're not the first thing you think of when you think of Euro house. You think of synths, and you think of foot to the floor house kick drums. You know what I mean? So what I'm suggesting is just find instruments which create the vibe first and foremost. After that, the next thing you want to do is find the root note of the song, okay? And again, on your piano, on your keyboard, on your guitar, whatever you got, just play a single note. Go up all the notes until you find it. If you're quick, then you'll know what you're doing. And if you don't, you'll just go up all the notes until you find one that just seems to be fine throughout most of the song, okay? Especially a section of the song at least. All right, it should be fine. From there, you want to assume that that is your root note in general, okay? And from there, you want to start to add your chords. And remember 1, 3, and 5, okay? What that means is there are 8 notes in a scale, okay? And if you took the C major scale, you go C, D, E, F, G, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, okay? And then C, D, E, F, G again. All right, so from C, D, E, F, G, C being 1, D being 2, E being 3, F being 4, and G being 5, the chord that we have is 1, 3, and 5. In this case, it's C, E, and G. Okay? And as I mentioned earlier, if you want to make that a minor chord, take your third, which in this case is E, and flatten it to E flat or D sharp. Okay? And that's what gives you that moody kind of dark feel, or, sad feel, or whatever. And you will want to kind of work your chord progressions around that. Okay, with chord progressions, the second chord oftentimes is, if you're not used to playing piano, it probably is the most difficult for you to go to. And if not the second, then it's going to be the third, because you might find one other chord that sounds great, but nothing else seems to work. Sometimes that's the case, don't worry too much about it. This is about creating that vibe. You can always come back and add something else extra in, but if it's just to kind of get off the ground in the first place, then just kind of run with what your gut kind of tells you initially. After that, I would suggest, get some drums down. If it's not the kind of song that has drums in it, it doesn't matter, but get something rhythmic down just so that they can kind of catch more of a vibe from what you're doing. I keep using this word vibe. It's just that, onomatopoeia, it's just vibe. It is what it says on the tin. You know what I mean? It's the feeling. You want to give them a feeling because music is emotional, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to trigger emotion. Okay, and I guess lastly, just listen to the song. If you've been producing for a while, then you'll kind of have a feeling immediately where this song can go. Obviously the types of music that you listen to will reflect that, but at the same time, you should have a good range of music styles kind of in your arsenal, and you should be able to kind of hear the bigger picture when people sing you songs or present you songs. And so just kind of go with how you feel, and that's the most important thing in this, I think. So I really do hope that's been helpful. If you guys have any more questions or you want to get in touch, please feel free to reach us at our website, www.starcitystudios.co.uk. Alternatively, you can email me at info@starcitystudios.co.uk, or of course, as per usual, you can catch up with me on Twitter at P1Casso. I'm always there, yo. And really, really love talking to you guys, and hopefully I can be of more assistance to some more of you in the future. So I look forward to hearing from you guys, and I hope that's been a great help. Have a great day, and we shall speak soon.